welcome to Season 2, Episode 3 of the AusCannaPodcast. I'm your host, Christina McMullen, and today we're diving into the AMCA's Compassionate Access Scheme, also known as the COMPASS program. Joining me is Eric Chan from Cannabis Warehouse, and we're covering everything you need to know about how to apply and get access to this incredible initiative. But before we dive into today's conversation, here's a quick reminder. If you have a burning question you'd like me to ask during the rapid fire segment, send it my way. If your question gets featured, I'll send you an AusCanna sticker pack as a thank you. Now, to get things rolling, let's start with some of those rapid fire questions to get to know Eric a little better. Okay, here we go. What's one piece of tech you can't live without?
The one piece of tech that I cannot live without is probably my chess.com app on my phone. Yeah.
Yeah.
I have to admit that I got completely absorbed into the beauty of chess because of my daughter. And then that application, I know maybe it's not the most traditional, maybe it's just another way of saying my phone, but that app and doing those puzzles and all that for someone in my role as a CEO and being part of a company trying to do good, great, and big things, that is what just gives me calm. It is my meditation. It is the thing that brings me out of the day-to-day storm. So I can't give it more praise.
Yeah, my husband and my teenage son now, or our teenage son now, they play chess all the time together and they love it. Yeah, my husband's probably got the same app that you have on his phone because he's always playing chess. He loves it. He thinks, and he says the same thing, that it's very relaxing and that he enjoys it. Yeah.
Yeah. So in some ways, I'm like, oh, I'm really saying my phone, which is such a hack answer, but it is what gives my life some sort of positive influence. So,
I like it. What's your favorite movie of all time?
this one's an easy one. So my wife and I, when we first met, knew we were right for each other because when we asked the question, "What is your favorite classic movie of all time?" especially that gives that nostalgia, is Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory.
Oh, like the classic one with
Classic. Gene Wilder, Willy Wonka and Chocolate Factory. Yeah, it's all crazy and weird and beautiful, all in the same movie. So
it is. It's a lot. I remember the Oompa Loompas were kind of scary, but by the end, you're like, I kind of like them.
yeah, so that's probably my answer.
Um, what's one thing most people don't know about you?
I guess one thing that people don't know about me is I my first job was actually working at Coles in the deli, slicing meat. I normally share in my professional life that my first job is being a professional poker dealer, right? That's
Oh,
yeah, I did that for 2.5 years between degrees. I chose one degree out of uni, hated it, and then shifted to another one, but there was a 2.5 year gap. But I don't tell people that, yeah, I used to slice ham at the Coles Deli.
that's
That
awesome
usually,
though.
yeah, that usually gets people by surprise. The other one probably would be related to the job thing is that I was for about a year a behavioral therapist with autistic kids as part of my degree because I did a degree in psychology. And yeah, I sometimes I sort of forget that part of my life, but yeah, I did behavioral therapy with autistic kids.
I'm sure that was slightly more rewarding than slicing ham. Not that I'm going to hate on slicing ham, but I would say it was slightly more rewarding.
It was slightly more rewarding, but man, working at a deli was sweet because you get to taste and eat everything, whether we're allowed to or not.
Yes.
I'm relying on the statute of limitations because that was a very long time ago.
Oh yeah, totally, totally. But like, let's get real. Any type of job you have that there's food, one
Yes,
of the perks is that they feed you on some level.
that's right. So that was really good.
All right. So this is technically my second listener question, but because these next two episodes are airing out of order,
Mhm.
it's not my first, it's my second. So it's all good, but here we go. I have a listener question for you. Felicity in Margate, Tassie wants to know what's your best cannabis hack or pro tip?
Ooh, this one's an interesting one, huh? What is my best cannabis hack or pro tip? Um, oh, okay. So, this one's a really good one, but it's not necessarily easily accessible. But if you have friends or you can search online and have people in your community, whether it be your Discord community or Reddit community or whatever community you're part of regarding cannabis, if you have someone who has a flower rosin press that heated press and tonnage press and can squeeze out some rosin for you, you are able to tell from the press itself whether the flower has been flushed properly, has been cured properly, whether it's actually old or fresh, right? Despite what the document on the COA says or what the brand tends to purport, when you have some suspicion that perhaps it's not the best batch or something has changed, that flower rosin press tells you a lot. So if you are able to connect or find someone or find a YouTube channel that does that sort of work and they can test batches for you or recommend, a certain product to test, that will give you a lot of insight to the current batch. And I found that really useful being in the cannabis community and knowing somebody who does that. It really gives me, I guess, a non-biased insight to why maybe this particular batch of flower from a brand and a cultivar that I really love may not be quite the same. Yeah.
I love that. I feel like we could go down a whole subcategory, like a whole nother episode to talk about that. It's a golden nugget of information right there. What's your guilty pleasure TV show?
Oh, so my guilty pleasure TV show currently is probably The Rookie on Netflix. Yeah, I never thought that I'd be interested in it. I only happened to play it out of I guess accident actually. I think I hit the button on my remote like incorrectly. But then I thought I'd let it run because I was looking for a show. But to be quite honest, I've been engaged with almost every episode in the
Yeah.
way that they tell this story and completely surprised me. So that would be my guilty pleasure because it's making me go to sleep at like 1:30 a.m. in the morning every night trying to chase the completion. So
I'll have to check that out. I have not seen that.
hmm.
Um, what what was your best vacation you've ever taken?
The best vacation I've ever taken was probably my first trip to Japan. I was lucky enough where my wife, or let's say fiance at the time, allowed me to go with my friends to Japan for my bucks. So I was there for 10 days. So the experience of being there with my closest group of mates, because I went to an all boys Catholic school as well, so we had that even extra level of closeness. We've known some of them I've known since I was 5 years old. Then experiencing Japan and realizing that the type of country where they have a lot of cohesion and a lot of I guess in some ways cultural isolation, right? Like they tend to keep any other cultures out from their own primary culture, created this world that I think the best way for me to describe it was like stepping into the Twilight Zone or Alice in Wonderland or through the closet of Narnia. Because there are some things in Japan that just make you go, oh my God, I can't even believe this exists. But then there is a sense of wonder and beauty in even the different districts within the main city of Tokyo that just make you go, wow, talk about a rich culture and experiencing all those things at once was quite mind blowing, I must admit. And it still remains probably in my top two, if not my favorite country to visit, despite having been there 3 times.
Japan's definitely on my to-do list, to-do travel list. It's a beautiful country. And everybody that I've met from Japan they're just beautiful people too when you talk to them. Yeah. I'm kind of
It,
jealous that you've been
it's
3 times.
it's beautiful, but extremely weird, all in the same, all in the same experience. Mm.
All right. So, who was your biggest role model growing up?
Hmm. I think my biggest role model when I was growing up happened to be a particular teacher in high school. His name was Mr. Anag, and unfortunately, when I was in year 12, he passed away from lung cancer despite never having smoked in his life. So there was a level of injustice there, I must admit, that we all felt. But he had such a profound impact in the way that he taught, in the way that he connected with us boys, in the way that he introduced us to maintaining the body as well as the mind, that when he passed, we had I guess its own sort of version of a wake, right? Because it wasn't the formal one, it was one that we created at school where nearly every student rocked up on a Saturday, and when they brought his casket as well, and we all formed an honor guard all the way out to the end road of our school because our school took up two streets. And yeah, it was just one of the most saddest experiences, but in some ways, it always helps me remember the level of impact he had in my life. Like, I really love sports and being physical and maintaining my physical health. And that was born from my experience with him. But it also, a lot of my, I guess, demeanor around responsibility and being a good man and all that sort of thing was born from his teachings as well. So,
I think teachers don't get enough credit, right? I think all of us can say at one point or another, we had one teacher that sparked something in us. And like I said, I don't think they get enough credit for that.
absolutely not. And to be fair, there are one that are horrible. Like we all remember those ones as well. But those who do cut through, they leave a lasting mark and impression.
Yeah, they absolutely do. All right. So, last question. Do you have any morning rituals or routines that set your day up for success?
Yes, I guess one of the morning rituals that I do when I get up is to do a short stint of stretching. For sure. In particularly because I like to sleep on my side and that tightens up the shoulders and hips, and that's where it was born from. But as I got older, I realized that if you spend even just 2 minutes making sure you stretch out the hips, stretch out the shoulders, get the looseness within those core areas of your body, it changes the entire day for you. Because if you keep stacking on that tightness and that compression and that physical suppression due to the many factors, whether it be causes from the mental that lead into expressions in the physical or purely physical because of the way that you sleep, you just don't understand that flexibility and strength actually determines a lot of how good you will feel during the day, how good your mental well-being will be during the day. And a lot of people discount that. A lot of people do, of course, the reading or the cup of coffee or the meditation and all that. But it all starts from the body. There's that symbiosis that people forget.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I know that when I get up and I do yoga first thing in the morning, it
Mm,
definitely changes the rest of my day.
mm.
It really does. It sets it off in a different with a different kind of motion. That's not even a word. It sets it off for a very different motion, right? Because I'm a little bit more relaxed when again, I'm a side sleeper just like you. I sleep almost fetal position in a tight little ball. So it's important for me to get up and stretch, and makes a huge difference.
Exactly. And you can imagine that over the years, like as you get into your 30s and 40s, and just that stacking of decades of that tightness that you don't alleviate, and just that one consistent chronic bit of pain, which, of course, us being in medicinal cannabis know we use the medicine in order to assist with that. But there are also other things that should be combined together, perhaps very simple fixes that, if done consistently over time, can change your life.
I agree with you, Eric. I absolutely do. All right. So, for the listeners who don't know anything about you and who missed the fabulous live episode at Mull Cafe in St. Kilda, do you mind kind of just telling us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, absolutely. Look, born and raised in Melbourne, and funny enough, my life during that time followed the very traditional and stereotypical Asian trajectory. In Australia, we got this thing where Asian kids do the Asian Fab Five. right? The particular math subjects, the particular science subjects, you know what I mean? Like we have that sort of stereotype, and I followed it. My parents expected of me to do, some sort of medical science, like become a doctor or a lawyer or some sort of profession. And that goes back to my previous answer of how I ended up having a gap and becoming a poker dealer for 2.5 years, where I got into some accounting, I can't remember now, like an accounting business degree, and I hated it after a year and a half. Left it. My dad told me if you're not going to study, you have to work. So I did professional poker dealing at Crown Casino for 2.5 years. So that was pretty cool. That really opened my eyes up to the larger world beyond, the 25-kilometer radius of where I lived. And that's a really important experience for a 19-year-old, right? And that eventually led me back to university, though, because, working in an environment like a casino is not really that good for the soul. So I went back to university, studied for a degree in psychology. And I guess one of the most significant parts of my life is that during my very final semester, like literally months before very final exams, my girlfriend of 5 years, who's my wife now, told me that she was pregnant. And you can imagine, for me, who was sort of living that student life, and I can be completely honest now because I'm a different person now, but I'm quite selfish, being an only child for most of my life, quite selfish and only thinking about myself. Receiving this news was just a complete, like, a movie vision narrowing and just tumultuous spiritual awakening and all that sort of jazz. But after my daughter was born, I can clearly say that that marked the moment where something just switched in me. And I guess it's a common story, especially for guys, perhaps, that when they do have a child, they get that experience of loving something more than they love themselves. And that is an incredible experience. And that led me down the journey of getting a job in medical research, which was the bulk of my career in medical research, particularly studying the relationship between aspirin, blood thinner, and anti-inflammatory properties, and possibly alleviating the onset of Alzheimer's, which is dementia or plaque formation, a form of inflammation in the brain. And so I did that for 7 years. But anyone who knows academia and research, there is always a ceiling because you got to keep getting more study, more degrees, and all that to progress. And I had no interest in that, which then led me down the journey of business. And I started just learning about business by going into the small business networks within Melbourne, and helping people with pitching and presentation because I had a bit of a skill for that. I was doing professional public speaking and all that for a little while for different reasons, which then eventually evolved to apprenticing under different business mentors to learn about what business actually is and what business can do to impact the world. That led me to finally a management consulting firm that I formed with a couple of friends and business partners. And it was during working in that business that I came across Dimmer, who is my business partner and CEO of Cannabis Warehouse. And it was in that experience with him where we were talking about working together on something else that he introduced me to the medicinal cannabis framework. Never heard about it before. I was in the middle of a very fancy restaurant with him. He put down like 100 grams of cannabis flower on the table in the middle of this restaurant, right? And not knowing about the medicinal cannabis framework, I was like, are you crazy? What is this? Right? But he goes, no, I have a script. Even if a police officer was here, it'd be completely fine. And seeing that and hearing him explain the medicinal cannabis framework and where we were heading as Australia, I think gave the same epiphany and aha moment that all of us in this industry understood about what was coming, that there was something special afoot. And because of that, that really inspired me because of my love for cannabis from, my days at university, from a recreational adult use mindset to now eventually learning a lot more about what the therapeutic outcomes can be from utilizing this beautiful medicine. And yeah, we decided to get together with a couple of other business partners, Kenny and Hamad, which is the four of us at Cannabis Warehouse. And our vision now, as I shared with you and Paul in the previous podcast, is there's something special that we can do here as Australians, as a medical side, as the adult use side, and bring something quite unique to the world. And that's how I ended up, I guess, right here in front of you.
It is kind of how you ended up in front of me because you guys have come up with an amazing program that just wrapped up a 6-month pilot,
Mm,
correct?
that's right.
Yeah, it's all about compassionate access, and I'm super excited to talk about it. So, I guess take me to the program's called the Compass program. And so take me to the beginning of kind of what inspired the creation of it and how it all kind of came together.
Yeah, so all of us who are involved in medicinal cannabis, from industry to patients, know that medicinal cannabis is an expensive medicine, right? And for anyone who's using a full gambit of the different dosage forms for their treatment, it can be anywhere from, 80 to $500 a month for treatment, right? And much to the credit of a lot of the brands, in fact, a large majority of them, they have implemented compassionate access and also concession that allows, I guess, some more affordability for those who are most financially struggling with maintaining this treatment option. And AMCA, the Australian Medicinal Cannabis Association, who I have to give credit where credit's due, the medicinal cannabis framework would not exist without Lucy and her team and AMCA here in Australia. They saw this problem with the people on the ground, especially the people in the most need. And they've been pushing for what we've been terming a centralized compassionate access scheme, because though the brands have been offering compassionate access, you can imagine an individual who has multiple products from different companies in their treatment plan, they would need to go and make a case to each and every company for compassionate access. And each company has a different, I guess, operating procedure, standard, whatever you want to call it, in their compassionate access. And they get varying results, from one bottle free to just 10% off to only a short, time limited relief system. It all is different. So AMCA wanted to create a centralized one where patients can get their entire treatment taken care of from one spot, easy to access, in control, in conjunction with their doctor and pharmacist and other healthcare professionals. Unfortunately, AMCA has been trying to get it funded for the last 2 years. And at the most recent UIC in 2023, they announced that despite the ex-minister in the Department of Health being very open to the Compassionate Access Program, the introduction of the new minister and, I guess, whatever changes that they had to go through, they decided to reject the proposal and actually not even really review it for another 2 years. They tabled it for another 2 years. So, as an audience member hearing that, I thought to myself, well, Cannabis Warehouse works as a distributor, and our infrastructure handles the compassionate access for all the different brands that we stock. So it occurred to me and my team that it only requires maybe a little bit of thinking, a little bit of creativity, and a little bit of tweaking, that perhaps we can create this system all ourselves. And if the industry and all the different players band together, then perhaps we can create something amazing with this centralized compassionate access scheme and have it industry run rather than relying on a handout from the government. So over the course of about 2 weeks to 3 weeks, our team was able to come up with the entire, I guess, framework on how to do it. We built it off our own dime and through our own infrastructure, worked with AMCA, the Cannabis Clinicians Australia, like as in the doctors and the nurse pracs from the Nurses Association within AMCA. And we started a pilot program and begun helping patients through this centralized program, because there were a couple of brands who really loved the idea and were willing to contribute. And that was the genesis of the Compassionate Access Program at the pilot stage.
I like the fact that you were like, yeah, I was sitting at UIC. They told me it wasn't going to happen for at least 2 years. They tabled it. And, you guys took that personally and was like, we can do this. We can make this happen. And a testament to you to 2 weeks to pull together. I mean, that's impressive to pull that together in 2 weeks, the framework, and to then launch the pilot program.
Yeah, look, I really appreciate that for sure. It's because we already had, I guess, 75% of the infrastructure created due to the existing compassionate programs. And so it was just about, like I said, a little bit of creativity, a little bit of tweaking to make it work in this framework. And more importantly, some true collaboration from the people in the industry.
Yes. Let's talk about that. I mean, was it literally just a pickup of a phone call and you were like, hey, we're going to do this and we're going to bring everybody together under one kind of umbrella. And you just kind of picked up the phone call and these companies just were like, yeah, take my money, take my product, let's do this? Or was there, you had to kind of sell them with the idea a bit?
Look, I think it was a little bit of both because, like any movie we've seen that shares an origin story of a great idea coming about, right? It did sort of start where I was having coffee and speaking to Serena from Dispense Direct. She's the head pharmacist and owner of Dispense Direct up in Brisbane, and I was sharing my thoughts about creating this infrastructure just over a drink, right, over a catch up, and she added her little bit here and said that she was willing to support from the pharmacy side and gave ideas on how that could work. And then I was like, oh, wow, that pharmacy dispensing side, all of a sudden, those ideas and her offer to collaborate, that part was slotted in. And then that was cemented, right? And then speaking to the Cannabis Clinicians Australia, and then we're like, oh, okay, the vice president of the association, Dr. Nick, I think he's president now, but back then he may have only been vice. And he was like, oh, well, I can be your starting doctor. And I've got a bunch of patients who are already stable on medicinal cannabis that could be the perfect candidates. So we can get something going straight away. And that slotted in. And then eventually, as those things slotted in, then picking up the phone to ring the companies was to share with them, this is the idea, this is where we're at, this is how we believe that it can work. And they really loved that. And like I shared in the other podcast that we recorded, real big props to Human and being the first ones to just jump in and say, you know what, whatever you need, especially for this pilot program, no cap on the amount. Let's make it work because we believe that there's something special here. So it was a mixture of both, and in some ways, maybe a little bit of serendipity in the timing for everything.
It's weird how that just works out sometimes, right? Just a coffee with a friend, and the next thing you know, you're slotting in pieces to a puzzle. And then, companies like Humacology, Tasmanian Botanics, who came to the table with $1 million, Mother
Yes.
Plant, like all these companies that came in that were like, this is a great idea. And I hats off to them and hats off to you guys for getting this off the ground and running. Did you guys encounter any challenges during that pilot phase that needed to be addressed kind of right away, or was it relatively smooth? Because you're saying most of that infrastructure was already there.
Yeah, so we did have to build new infrastructure in order to suit the centralization aspect and also the part of the program where we determine having control and the submission and review process be in the hands of the doctor. That was completely new. So the submission process, the review panel process, all that was new. So there was the standard challenges of evolving tech and seeing what worked and didn't work and all that. That was fine. I think the main challenge though was actually trying to figure out one, what are the constraints that we should place on it, how to articulate the value proposition while still being in pilot and mitigating people's expectation for it to be perfect, and also alleviating some of the classic objections. Like one of the objections that we had from some people, and it wasn't even from the brands themselves who wanted to contribute or whom I've spoken to. They were very happy, but outsiders sort of looking in and going, well, the brands are donating for free. They get so many pressures as well. Why is it that the brands don't get anything? And being very negative and trying to help them understand that this is a process, it's a journey, that we're building it from infancy. Those policy type things were actually the most difficult. So an example of that would be, should we allow completely new patients in whom the doctor has seen, they've never done medicinal cannabis before, but they fit the profile of being a perfect candidate for medicinal cannabis? Or should it be just patients who've already been stabilized on medicinal cannabis because we know it's going to be effective and it's a limited resource, especially back in pilot program stages. And this is well before, TASBot donating, and this is way before that, right? How do we balance that? And then when we share that with the general public that this is the one that we're doing, which in the end we landed on in the pilot phase, we should just have it at least initially with those who are already stabilized on medicinal cannabis, right? Then inevitably, oh, but what about us? What about us? And making sure that, you can articulate the pathway and why we chose that. Those things were the most difficult and challenging.
Yeah. So for the patients that did receive some of the products through the program, what were their feedback like?
So the feedback so far was wonderful because it was easy. It was simple for them. They only had to speak to the doctor, agree to be a part of the program, agree and understand that this is at that stage just a pilot, that we can only promise 6 months worth of treatment. And as long as they were happy with that, it became then in the hands of their doctor who went through the submission process. Then it had the review process by the panel. And once the submission was approved, then the medication would be sent to the pharmacy and they can collect the dispensing. The patient can collect the dispensing. They really love the simplicity aspect. And also, I personally believe a big part of it is people do not want to have to go and ask people for things. They don't want to necessarily make it so public and have to speak about their financial hardship over and over and over again. That is so key, right? And in other compassionate programs, sometimes that was the case. In fact, even after their initial submission or desire for access to compassionate access, they usually would have to then justify and be asked a lot of questions and be the ones to do it. And it's very hard on the other end when you're the person running the program not to get overly emotionally connected, to be objective and non-biased, etc., etc. But in this program in Compass, it's all in the hands of their doctor, who has already gone through that deep work and deep relationship building and understanding the patient properly. So when the doctor and perhaps the panel need to have a discussion, because they're peers as healthcare professionals, they have that discussion and that back and forth where there's perhaps some rationalization and justification needed to be made on a different sort of level. And it's much more comfortable than, say, the other scenario where the patient has to be involved. And that has been one of, I guess, the best parts of this program.
I was going to say, again, at the beginning, when you're talking about, yeah, some of these companies did have compassionate access programs, but it was the patient's responsibility to kind of chase them all. I mean, that's very overwhelming. And then you're right, you factor in, again, I'm applying for this because I'm going through some sort of hardship. And to talk about a hardship, no matter what that hardship is difficult and tough. And then to have to do it over and over and over again, like for some people that can be very like anxiety triggering, that can cause depression, that could, yeah,
And
it's
with different people too. So after they
exactly.
convince one, they got to go and try to convince this next person who has a different set of points of reference for acceptance, and just going over and over again. Yeah.
Yeah, I was going to say overwhelming at the very, very least.
Mm.
So have you completed the 6 month program or are you just kind of wrapping it up? Forgive me if you've already said.
No, no, no. So the pilot was done, and about a month or so ago, about a month and a half now, it was about mid July. We had a webinar, an AMCA webinar, and a CCA AMCA webinar, because Cannabis Clinicians Australia, the Nursing Association, and the Pharmacy Association are sub associations underneath AMCA. We had a webinar and we announced the launch of the Compass program into what we've been calling phase one, but essentially out of pilot, right? And now we are happy and willing to talk about it openly, to share it to the public on a podcast like this, to go and share it at conferences, and to really reach out and expand the awareness a bit further, because we feel that we've gotten the program, whether it be infrastructure, whether it be policy wise, to a solid state that it can handle more capacity, and also, I guess, handle the brunt of perhaps the scrutiny that will come from it. Like I shared, as soon as Cannabis posted about AMCA releasing the Compass program, we instantly got comments of people scrutinizing it in a way which, to be fair, I feel like if they actually watched the webinar, they would have had their concerns alleviated. But people don't necessarily do that, and instantly we got scrutiny. And then people will comment on their comment, going, "Okay, I'm going to take that as the point of reference," and then comment more. It's just like, yeah, we knew that was going to come, but we are into phase one and out of pilot now.
Walk me through it. I'm a patient and I would like to apply. So
Mm.
my first point of reference is my doctor, correct?
Absolutely, absolutely. In order to keep it professional, independent, and clinically objective, we've centralized it around the healthcare professional as being the liaison for the patient and the program. So the patient needs to speak to their doctor, direct them towards the Compass information, which is on our cannabiswarehouse.com.au/compass URL. The webinar that we did that explains it in full is there. We're going to have the PDF slide deck downloadable, which has been designed to be standalone, where you can just read and glean all the information you require from it, but also have access to the webinar to have it as a reference point as well. All that information first. If the doctor is happy and wishes to learn more, or at least preliminary be part of the program, they just need to create a user account on our practitioner registration, and our system will further drip feed through email more information about how the process works, what about the process that is specific to them, right? So it's really around the practitioner really understanding how the program works and being the liaison between the patient and the program.
My doctor's on board. What's the next step?
Yep. So then the next step would be that the doctor who's on board would get onboarded by one of our team members to further understand the parameters around the program. So, for example, the really important parameter that each submission covers 6 months worth of treatment, right? And so part of the onboarding not only just 6 months, I think this is important to say, the doctor can choose as many products as they want, but for each product, the assumption is 1 unit per month of that product over 6 months. So what that would mean is that the doctor then taking on the onboarding and learning all the things that relate to the patient is able to convey to the patient what the parameters, perhaps limitations, and even what the possibilities and potential of the program will be, because we want to ensure that the patient and the doctor both fully understand and feel really comfortable about the boundaries. That is really important. Once that is done, then the doctor will just need to go and make a case submission, which can be done on their online portal. Within the case submission, they only need to do a couple of things, which is first off, look through the portfolio of donated products and select which products they deem suitable and want to include in the compassionate access submission. And each of the products have the ability to provide more information on their product cards and all that. We have that all within the system. And in fact, we're actually going to make it even more robust and have really in-depth information that even like Catalyst and Canada Reviews doesn't have. Like I'm talking about, remember how I shared with you earlier about the flower rosin pressing images and what that means and all that? I'm talking that level of depth of information to further enhance what the doctor can learn about the product and make an assessment on whether or not it's suitable. So they select the product. Then all they need to do is provide the clinical picture for the patient and also the financial hardship picture of the patient. The review panel will be basing their assessment on the answers in those 2 primary boxes. Yeah. And if there is more questions to be asked, the review panel doctors and nurse pracs can communicate with the doctors themselves, right? There is no barrier. There is no middle person to do that. They get to communicate directly and have that peer-to-peer relationship and make a proper assessment for that. Once they feel that the assessment is right, part of the submission that the doctor makes on behalf of the patient is to select which tier of support they require. And in the Compass program, there is currently 3 tiers. The first 2 tiers are completely free in terms of the product. The product is completely free to the patient. However, tier 1 is completely free, everything. Tier 2, though, the doctor has made an assessment that the patient can contribute just a little bit to alleviate some of the pressures, especially on the pharmacy, who currently in phase 1 have to bear the brunt of not only the dispensing, but also the patient support. In the future, we would love for the Nursing Association to become part of the program and perhaps be a support line that the patients can call. But right now, the pharmacy is the one who's bearing the brunt. So they contribute simply $10 for dispensing support fee, just a little bit there. There's also been the aspect, some of the thinking behind that tier 2 and why it even exists is that we know from economic theory and psychological theory, some people don't appreciate free. And when they've invested a little bit, then they take it a little bit more seriously. And some of the doctors and nurse pracs share that understanding and feel that the program will be respected if they're selected into tier 2 and tier 1 reserved for the most hard hit individuals. Right? Finally, in tier 3, it is the tier where the doctor has determined that the patient does have some financial capability, but needs a decent amount of support. What that support will be is that the patient is required to pay $40 per unit, regardless of what the normal recommended retail price of the product is. So they just pay $40 per unit. They have to select the tier on behalf of the patient, which we hope they've had a discussion with the patient and came to that conclusion together, right? And yeah, and then they select the pharmacy that they want to partner with to utilize. It's all completely free, open. There's no restrictions. There's no, keeping the script here and charging. None of that bullshit that we've heard before, right? So that closed loop clinics and pharmacies have been doing. It's all completely open, but they can select the participating pharmacy, perhaps due to just geographical location, so they can do a physical pickup, or they can select one that does mail outs and get it direct to door. So
I
that would
was
be.
just Sorry, I was just about to say, how do you ensure that transparency and that fairness, like what you were just talking about there?
So the pharmacies that we've asked to come on board actually have to have ticked a bit of a criteria list from Cannabis Warehouse's point of view and AMCA's point of view as well. One big tick, and it's not essential, but one big tick is that they have joined AMCA before, because in joining AMCA and the Pharmacy Association, in the joining process, they have actually agreed in their signing to join, like the agreement that they signed to join or whatever you want to call it, that they are going to be an ethical pharmacy or an ethical entity and support the system for the betterment of patients. So there is this sort of, I guess, public declaration that they're going to do the right thing. But we also vet a lot of these pharmacies to ensure that they are cannabis appropriate and in some ways expert pharmacies, so they know how to properly support. They're not gonna make the mistake of substituting an indica and a sativa profile for someone who suffers sleep issues versus anxiety, right? Like they have to have passed a lot of this criteria and be well known for being good at cannabis, not only in the medical science and patient support side, but also have the infrastructure at their pharmacy to deal with medicinal cannabis, which can be the limiting factor for a lot of pharmacies. Not enough vault space, not understanding how to do proper dispensing or reading difficult scripts and all that. And then finally, we do make a character judgment on the pharmacies, but any feedback that is given to us from patients or doctors of anything around extra charges or incorrect charging or holding scripts and all that, we are very open that we are asking the doctors and the patients to give us that feedback, and we will be investigating it on their behalf.
I like it because you do hear horror stories sometimes when you're dealing with pharmacies. So I like the fact that you guys have been proactive with the pharmacies that you're choosing to work with, that in theory, you've mitigated those risks as much as you possibly can.
Yeah.
Um, do you have any? I know that you've just kind of come out of the pilot program, but do you have any success stories that you can talk about patients that have benefited from it?
Well, from the pilot program, which started, I guess the first patient was entered in early December, to where we are now in late August, we're currently supporting over 120 patients, I believe, right now, if my memory serves me correctly. And one really good thing is that we haven't had any complaints yet, which is always a good, which is
Yeah.
always a good thing. And I
Yay.
and I think a big part of that is making sure that you communicate really well about, again, the limitations of the program and what they're signing up for, right? So that they do not have an expectation that the program cannot meet, that over-promising and under-delivering part, and also asking for empathy about who we are in the program. That's a big part of it as well. And we've had feedback from different practitioners about their patients that this has been life-changing for them, because the most classic story that we hear, the details may be a little bit different, but overarching, the foundation is the same. I used to have to give up my medication because I could not afford to pay for it. It was a choice between putting food on my table or paying for my rent or mortgage or having this medication. Previously, I would have to choose that over my medication, of alleviating my pain and suffering. With the Compass program, that has completely changed. And that is so meaningful to all involved. And I think we all can understand how important that is.
I think that like, again, that's yeah, to know that you're changing people's lives so they don't have to make those decisions and that they are on a medication that they're stable on and that's working for them. That's huge. That's significant. What are some of the long-term goals that you guys have with the Compass program beyond what's kind of what you're doing right now?
So ultimately, I guess one of the short to medium term goals is that by this time next year, we want to help 1,000 patients to really get that footprint. And part of that, beyond the obvious of helping people in need, is also if this, what we've been calling phase one, and the reason why we've been calling it phase one, is that if we have this level of success, this level of patient engagement, and the ability to service such a large amount of patients while still maintaining independence, while still having a robust system, while still maintaining a system that is not being abused or misused, I believe that we can actually go back to the government and ask for that funding, and then create a program that can be so far-reaching that perhaps every pharmacy can support it, right? That's one of those ultimate goals there, and I think a lot of scrutiny has been placed on the industry at the moment, and we've all heard what's been happening in New South Wales and pharmacies and doctors being struck off and all that. If something like this, and before I even go into that next point, one of the criticisms that I recall hearing at the last UIC from government officials, TGA and ODC, in I guess less formal conversations is, hey guys, we understand where you're coming from. You love cannabis and you see the best in the industry, but you got to understand that for us who are not within the industry, we look at you and we see doctors taking kickbacks. We see that you've got now up to 5 associations with all different messaging. You can't even come together to provide a united front. These are the things that we see, and those who have not even had the privilege of engaging with you and seeing the best of you, those policymakers behind desks in Canberra or wherever, this is what they see, and this is the judgment they're making, right? So a program like this, which is born from proper collaboration at all levels where people are committing, I'm hoping that it will be a hallmark of the progression of us as an industry and evolving beyond the Wild West days that, it's actually quite common for many new and nascent industries in terms of its life cycle. I like to think of it as, well, if it's an infant growing into an adolescent, we all understand how adolescents and teenagers can be. You can't fault them for having issues. You understand that as part of the journey, and we hope that they grow into good adults, right? That's where I feel the industry is, and I hope that a program like this will do that. And I guess further to that, like I shared before, I would love for the Nurses Association to get involved and nurses in general, where they can perhaps be the support mechanism, the product expert mechanism as well, to then share the load beyond doctors, nurse pracs, and pharmacists, and have the wider healthcare community, like registered nurses who aren't nurse pracs, but registered nurses who got nothing to do with prescribing, but more on the support side, get involved in the community, and then show the larger healthcare community within Australia that medicinal cannabis should be taken seriously. That's what we hope for.
I like it. Just to kind of follow up with a bit of that topic that we were just talking about there, how does Compass work around reducing the stigma around medicinal cannabis? Because you guys you talk to a lot of people. You're talking to your pharmacies, you're talking to the doctors, and again, you've got a program that is benefiting the patient. So how do you guys take that on to reduce the stigma around the medicinal cannabis in the first place?
Yeah. So I guess there's so many points that we can speak about, but one of the, I guess, strategies or the way that we perceived how the Compass program can add to that larger question and that bigger picture really has to do with the science, right? The science, and not only the science, but the science that's closer to the policymakers, meaning the data that can be gleaned from the Australian population, or case studies and all that are born from the Australian population in the immediate term. And what I mean by that is those who have not either taken the time to really look deep into it, and this includes everything from pain specialists to psychologists to policymakers. One of the very common things they say is that, oh, there's not enough data, right? And if you take classic scientific principles, well, classic scientific principles is that we do randomized controlled trials for that compound, right? And now you're prescribing flower, each cultivar is different. You should have a randomized controlled trial for each and every, like that old hat, right? And we know that this agricultural medicine cannot be put in that same framework. However, the concept of having more data is really important. One of the things that the program is very thankful for is that the On Tracker team, who conduct a medical research data collection and have, the infrastructure and the technology, like app technology and platform technology, to record data correctly and create research design, have committed to donating their system, which means that if we can get the sample, which our intention is to have 1,000 patients, right, to commit the data to the program, which will then in turn be data that can be publishable because it's being designed correctly by people who in the know, not just simple, like a Google questionnaire. It's actually people who actually understand research design contributing to the on tracker. And we hope that in the coming month, we will make the on tracker 3-minute questionnaire, really, if you are doing it efficiently, to be a requirement to stay in the program, that every month you have to fill in, your answers to the questionnaire, contribute to that data, and then build that pool of information and scientific support for medicinal cannabis beyond, and add it to what we already have, the multitude of research around the different compounds and the interactions of the different minor cannabinoids and all that, but then build something a little bit closer to home so that we can bring forth that convincing argument to the naysayers, to the fence sitters, and make sure that medicinal cannabis, like I said, can be taken seriously, because you and I both know, I think you and I alone in this conversation probably can count up to 50, maybe even 100 people that we've come across or spoken to who've had a level of success story for their health outcome that is just life-changing, amazing, emotional, all of those things.
Oh no, I completely agree. One, to circle back to Chad Non-Tracka, I love that guy. I love that app. It's awesome. I actually was part of, I guess it's almost a year and a half ago now, one of their trials. I
Mm,
love that app. It's great, and it's great to see where it's going, and knowing that they're also, again, collaborating with you guys to give you some of that, what you're saying, the numbers, the scientific data that the doctors want, that those politicians, we want numbers kind of thing. And it's hard, again, it's very hard to do that because it's an agricultural product. And then, to speak to the other thing that you just said, I think it's why I keep doing what I'm doing, because I keep talking to people, and the more conversations I have, listening to them get off of other drugs that, I mean, yeah, sure, maybe opiates were working for them, but they weren't leaving the house, right? Their mental state wasn't the best. They were mopey at the very least, right? And to listen to how, they've taken a little bit of time, they've tweaked what works for them, and now they're at a point that they're like, yeah, you know what? I do leave the house now. I do go have coffee with girlfriends, or you know what? I can go grocery shopping now because I'm not in pain, or I'm not having that panic attack when I open my front door.
mm,
And that's why I keep having the conversation. That's a quality of life thing.
mm.
And I can't think of any other pharmaceutical that the reoccurring theme is, man, that really gave me my quality of life back.
That's right. And with such a large safety profile as well, right? Yeah. And there's this stigma around always viewing medicinal cannabis, and very important to put the medicinal side, right? Confusing it with classic weed culture, which is around, the flower and around certain maybe like extracts and all that, which have their place for therapeutic effect. In fact, maybe even easier to answer the scientific aspect because you're isolating the different compounds, right? But there's this, I guess, visualization in their mind about that weed culture and Snoop Dogg and, Cheech and Chong and all that. But medicinal cannabis has things where, well, we actually have medicine that has all these other cannabinoids that are non-psychoactive, and we can reduce the psychoactive properties to a mere 1 milligram, per mil, right? And so just having the understanding that this medicinal cannabis framework that is being created all across the world, this medicinal cannabis medicine, I should say, that's being created across the world, is so wide and varied and has so many applications, and is so probably different to what the general individual who perhaps doesn't know much about cannabis beyond what they see in pop culture. It is so different and so far from the reality that they believe it is, which is simply smoking massive joints or ripping bongs, right? Like it's so far from that.
Yeah, it is. It so is. I mean, like I get the reefer madness,
Mm.
right? And the couch locking and all of that. But for me personally, that's not why I consume medicinal cannabis. For me, for the most part, I want it to get me off the couch, out there doing things. And you're right. It's again having those conversations, working with people like Chad and the On Track team to gather that data together so that way you can have more conversations to be like, no, it's not just a one-off thing. We've got some numbers. Um, what kind of message would you like to share with anybody who would be considering supporting the Compass program?
I guess the message I would share is please remember your why. Please remember your why. Dig deep, take a step back, and remember why you got into medicinal cannabis to begin with. And this actually goes everything to everything from patients to doctors to pharmacists to brands who might be considering either contributing product or taking the time. Because one of the most common resistances, if I can be perfectly and brutally honest, right, is for the healthcare practitioners, pharmacies and doctors, is I don't have time. This is another thing on my plate. This is another thing I have to learn, right? All the way to brands where it's like, oh, I can't, give up the money or this and that and the cost and all that sort of thing. But on the flip side of that, no matter whom I meet, if I'm speaking to them about that bigger picture, that why, almost all of them will say to me, and to be fair, some have been very honest to me. It's like, oh, it's just about money. Okay, kudos. At least you're admitting it to me up front. But the majority say, we're doing it to change something for the better. We do it about patience. We do it because I had a personal story or a personal encounter of a friend or a family member who's really benefited, and I want this to go out to the larger public and help them as well. Well, it's so easy to do so with lip service, but there's a different thing altogether about doing it with action. And please remember your why, because if your why resonates with the purpose, vision, ethos, mission of what something like a Compass program is doing, what AMCA is doing, what we're trying to do, then us aligning and putting our hands up and making each other known, making us known to each other that we actually share this same vision, we can do so much more. We can do so much more. We can create such an impact. We can leave such an amazing legacy for ourselves, for your business, for your purpose, for our country, for everything, for patients. We can do it if we do it together. The fallacy is thinking that you need to own it all or be at the top of the mountain to be the only one to create the change that you want to change. But the new age, in my understanding, whether it be because I'm a millennial, whether it because I'm biased because of the books I read around this topic, what we can do together can move things forward so much further. And I'm even going to say this, even from a business aspect, if you truly wanted to think of it as purely from a business aspect, right? Growing the pie, growing the capability, growing the acceptance of cannabis because it's done right and is accepted within the larger community makes everyone more money anyway. Makes everyone more money anyway. And what they don't understand with all these different companies or practitioners who are doing the wrong thing that brings on the ire of the regulators and the government and the naysayers, all it has done is restricted the growth of the pie and actually cause more detriment, whether you come from the money perspective, whether you come from the patient perspective, all because you're centralized around this me type of thing. But cannabis and where Cannabis Warehouse stands of creating medicinal cannabis framework that integrates and synergistically comes together with the culture of cannabis, that the 1,000 years of genuine positive culture that it has brought, bringing those two things together that that synergy is what actually creates such beautiful human outcomes, right? That create beautiful human outcomes. So my call to action is please remember your why and use a tool or framework like Compass to be your first stepping stone. And what my desire is that you'll create your own, and then us who have banded together help and support you further grow that as well. And just be something more than just about money and selfishness. It's just so yeah, I don't know. Like it gets me quite riled up that the simplicity of all that, it just makes no logical sense, even if you come from the money perspective, to have that type of, I guess, behavior.
Nah, I mean, that's an excellent call to action. And I couldn't agree with you more in the sense that, you know, I'm gonna totally screw up the saying, but what is it? The rising tide lifts all ships or lifts all
Yeah,
boats.
yeah,
I wholeheartedly believe that 100%. I believe that when there's something good and it's a shining beacon of I'm going to say it, just common sense. I feel like this program is common sense. We should have a compassionate access program. It should be centralized. It should be easy. Medicinal cannabis is not the only drug that has a compassionate access program. It isn't a new idea. So to have a robust program where you guys have taken all of these little parts and that you've put them together and you're like, no, these guys were all on the same page. We're all going to do the same thing and we're trying to help the patient, right? I think at the core, how could somebody not want to support that?
yes. How could they not, right? And it just seems so obvious that something that we should be a part of, because ultimately we want to end up on the right side of history. I feel it very fortunate that when we started this business, or around sort of that time, docu-series like Dope Sick about, the oxy and opioid crisis, and pain hustlers on Netflix, and the pharmacist and all that came out around the same time, and that has really, I guess, influence the way that we at Cannabis Warehouse do things, is that you can easily end up on the wrong side of history. And when you do things a certain way, one a negative mistake, like I don't know, have you seen a Big Vape on Netflix about the nicotine vaping
No, I
origin?
haven't.
Right.
No.
So just quick 15 seconds is that nicotine vaping actually has been proven to be a really good smoking cessation tool. But because it was something completely new, Juul associated nicotine vaping with lifestyle culture in advertising, and that's what created this huge epidemic of youth using nicotine vaping, because they associated the two things together, and it was a really bad psychological process to associate between the youth and something that's highly addictive. That lesson is why we have such strict advertising regulations, right? And so it's about coming together as a community, even as a patient, to understand that this flex and flow between people who love cannabis and see the beauty of it, even in adult use, even for the freedom of a adult self-determining individual, and what we believe in our Western culture as well, to understand that working together with the regulators in healthcare, because healthcare essentially has a moral aspect to it, right? Working together is the only way, and showing empathy for each other, and the process that is required, is the only way that we can really shift forward, so we do not have something happen that we do not expect. Because in our eyes, sometimes we can be so gung-ho in loving cannabis and go like, we should just go there straight away. But Big Vape and what I saw in that origin story actually really showed that no one expected it, right? From a simple advertising campaign to cause what? Now they've got vaping detectors in high schools for 13-year-olds using ridiculous amounts of nicotine, even worse than smoking in terms of nicotine consumption, because it's like they puff at like 5 or 6 times the rate than smoking a cigarette, right? So
Yeah, slippery slope, right? Slippery slope. And you're right. At some point, you got to ask yourself, what side of history do you want to be on?
that's right. I do not want to end up on a docu-series where, can you imagine if they did something like, oh, compassionate access program, they're giving away, free medicine. Yeah, didn't drug dealers used to give free medicine to hook them in? Like anything can be framed in the negative if you end up on the wrong side of history, because you as a collective who represent this industry, this medicine, this agricultural flower, this plant, if you don't do it right, then those who are the naysayers get to write how you are um, perceived for the rest of the time. And none of us want that. Not patients, not healthcare professionals, not industry leaders, not commentators like yourself.
No, we don't. We wanted, at the end of the day, it goes back to that quality of life thing. And we want an understanding and we want the stigma to stop. And it's just, we want to be treated like everybody else.
That's right. Yeah. Yeah, we want to be treated like everybody else, and I really look forward to that day when it does happen, when driving laws change. Just a quick comment on the driving laws. I remember watching a clip about, yeah, was it RBT? Where they do the roadside alcohol
Yep.
testing,
Yep.
and there's this guy where his eyes weren't even looking in the same direction because he was so hyped up on opioids, prescribed opioids, and he blows zero, right? So he's good to go. He's
Yep.
good to go. He's all fine. He's not even his eyes not even looking the same direction. He was so on the nod and all that from the medication he's taking. But someone who has some cannabis in their system from use the previous night with no impairment, 6 months suspension. Like it's just nuts. And we need to do the right thing together in order to get the regulators over the line in seeing and perceiving our industry differently.
I agree. I agree. I think your call to action is beautiful, Eric. I mean, honestly, again, why wouldn't somebody want to get from the patient's perspective, I need to have the conversation with my doctor. And
Mhm.
then from the industry perspective, they just need to pick up the phone and call you guys and be like, I want to be a part of this program. It's that
Yeah.
easy. It's that simple. Get involved.
That's right. Get involved and take heart that it's being independently overseen by AMCA. It's not overseen by Cannabis Warehouse. I'm just the voice for it because, the core infrastructure and technology is something that we created as a business, and we were very fortunate to be on the ground level. And, I've been very happy to be the voice for it. But it is independently overseen by AMCA that has a board, that has, legal people, that has all that, who wants to keep it protected, to have it not abused. So this is something that, like I said before, we can do it together, we can do it right, and we can show the world how it can be done and have this replicated, perhaps even in different countries. And that would be an amazing thing to see from what we've created here in Australia.
I couldn't agree more. And hats off to, you, Eric, and the team there at Cannabis Warehouse for getting this program through the pilot and now up and running. Just it's amazing. And from a patient perspective, I really can't thank you enough.
Thank you. I really appreciate that. And thank you for having me on. It's just been really great to share. This is probably the first time I've spoken so long form about it, but it's been a joy to be a part of, and really appreciate you providing the platform for us to share some more of the awareness.
And we will definitely make sure that the information is in the show notes as to how to find the Compass program and where to apply.
Yep. So very simple, cannabiswarehouse.com.au/compass. It will have the links to the webinar, have the links to, AMCA and the Cannabis Clinicians Association and their perspective on it. And yeah, simple as that, to direct yourself as a patient and your practitioner.
And that's a wrap. I hope you found the conversation with Eric about the Compass program as informative and inspiring as I did. As always, if you have any questions or thoughts, feel free to reach out. And don't forget to hit the subscribe button so you never miss an episode. Until we meet again, friends, thank you for taking time out of your busy schedule to listen. And remember, people only see the decisions you've made, not the choices you had.